Hello, everyone. It's another episode of Vablonsky, and today I'm out in Northern Virginia as you can see, in a parking lot in Northern Virginia. But today's mission is to eat some pho. So my objective today is to go to some pho places. I wouldn't say the mission today or the objective is to find the best pho in Northern Virginia. But I guess I'm just out to go to some neighborhood spots to enjoy a nice hot piping bowl of pho, because I haven't had pho in a while. And it's been cold lately. It's been blustery. And so I want some pho. So I'm going to go visit some neighborhood spots, some interesting spots, and to enjoy some pho. If I come across some really good pho, I'll let you know. If it qualifies as among the best in Northern Virginia or the DMV, that would be a nice surprise. That would be a nice find. And it would be nice for us to find that together. So this spot is called Pho Huy. It's out in Alexandria. Not in the old town part of Alexandria. It's kind of in the western half of Alexandria. And here it is. Pho Huy. I'm going to start with this, the Vietnamese spring roll. You know, when I get pho, I usually get spring rolls with them. I just can't help it. They just go well together. And these here are filled nicely. It's packed pretty nicely with meat. Pork, I can see some pork in there. Some stray strands of vermicelli noodles. I'm gonna dip it in the Nook Num, the fish sauce. First thing I notice is the skin is very thin, crispy thin. Wow. I would say that most places the skin is a little bit thicker. Wow. They definitely don't skimp on the filling here. The filling is quite prominent, proportional to the wrapper. So what you get is a lot of soft, meaty filling with a very thin, crispy wrapper. And I would say too, lengthwise, it seems to be longer, maybe by an inch, than most of the spring rolls that I've seen. The pho bowl that I ordered is their special, house special, the Dak Biet. And it comes with a fatty brisket, soft tendons, Bible tripe, meatballs, and flank. So this is loaded with everything. So usually what I do first is I taste the broth. I check out the broth first and see what that's like. Haven't had pho in a while, so this is hitting the spot right now. Okay, so what you have here is a very clear broth. Meaty, yes. What you taste is the sweetness of the broth. Now, not overly sweet. It's not an overwhelming broth. And by that, I don't mean to say something negative about it. In fact, I want the broth not to be kind of a hit-in-your-face broth. It has to be a subtle broth, mostly. My sensibilities tend to be more northerly because pho in Vietnam, in the north, is a much more beefy kind of subtle broth that isn't as sweet as the southern Vietnamese pho broth. And what we typically know as pho here in the United States has a more southern profile to it. So when we think of pho here in the United States, what we're really thinking of is the southern Vietnamese pho, which tends to be more complex, more sweet, with more constituent ingredients, perhaps, in the making of it. But it's hard to find. It's hard to find a shop that specializes in, Hanoi style or northern pho. Typically, those are few and far between. Are there such pho places in your area? Northern Virginia has a very large Vietnamese population, but I don't see any northern pho places. So typically what we have is southern Vietnamese pho when we go to the pho restaurants around here in Northern Virginia. Okay, the noodles have to be al dente, which they are here. You kind of have to get to the noodles quickly so that they don't get too soft. Okay, let me say a few words about how I approach, my condiments with regards to pho. I probably am in the minority in the sense that I don't like to dress it up too much. The way I look at it is, if a place spends, upwards of 8 to 10 to 12 hours or more, making the broth, putting all that labor and love into it, and all those ingredients, sometimes, so-called special secret ingredients. I want to enjoy the broth for what it is. Again, that's more of maybe a northern sensibility. I do certainly put herbs in there. For example, I will put the Thai basil in there usually, but I will rip it up to release the essence of the basil so that the flavor will infuse into the liquid. I usually don't squeeze lime in there. I usually don't do that. And as for the jalapeno peppers, sometimes I do, but typically I don't put that into the broth. And the bean sprouts, I tend to leave those alone as well, because I find that when you put the bean sprouts in there, they tend to get soft and they start leaching water, which kind of alters the broth sometimes, kind of waters it down. So I don't use the bean sprouts a lot. Okay, as for the main condiments, the sriracha and the hoisin sauce, I typically would put them in one of the dipping bowls that they supply, and I will put them side by side and allow them to sit together, maybe intermingle, but I don't, and this is important, I don't squeeze the sriracha bottle and empty the contents into my soup, and I don't squeeze the hoisin sauce directly into the broth. I don't do that. Again, I want to keep it clean, and I don't want to disturb what the chef has done. They've put a lot of work into their broth, and I don't want it to alter it drastically like that with, melted sriracha and hoisin sauce all coalescing into the soup. I don't do that. Maybe that's my northern sensibility, how they do it in the north in Vietnam, or it could just be my Cantonese sensibilities, wanting to keep it pure and simple. Okay, I'm at Pho 24 now in Annandale, Virginia, which is in Fairfax County. Annandale locally in the DMV is known for its Korean food because it's a Korean enclave of sorts. Some people colloquially call it Koreatown, even though it doesn't have that designation. So it's not your most likely place to get a pho meal, but Pho 24 is a place I've been to before, and I do remember it being quite nice. And so I haven't been here in a while. I'm basically renewing my acquaintance with Pho 24. Yeah, Pho 24 conforms to that naming convention that you find with a lot of pho restaurants, in that their name contains the word pho followed by a number, Pho 24. So locally, there's a place called Pho 75. I think the 75 signifies the year in which the Vietnam War ended in 1975. I don't know what 24 signifies, but the number is always a number that is important to the owner in some way. You know, it could be the year that he came to the United States. It could be his birthday. Sometimes the number signifies the year in which the pho restaurant opened. But since we haven't gotten to 2024 yet, I don't think that's the case here, unless the owner has a time machine that I don't know about. The spring roll here is very crispy, and I would say fried more deeply than the one I had earlier at Pho Huy. It's filled quite nicely. It's pretty bulky. I would say though it's a little oilier than at Pho Huy, and the outer skin is fried such that it's starting to blister and fall apart. Not a bad thing necessarily. It's just that that's what it is. It's got flakes of skin kind of breaking off, saturated skin kind of from the oil kind of breaking off at the exterior. I like the Nook Num, the fish sauce here. It's got a lot of chili flakes floating in it. Also, unlike Pho Huy, you actually get some slivers of carrots and a big leaf of romaine, because you're supposed to make a wrap with the spring roll and dip it in the Nook Num. I don't typically do that, but that's a common way to eat it. But at Pho Huy, you don't even get that option because you just get it as a spring roll by itself without the accoutrements. I wrapped it in the lettuce leaf and the carrots and dipped it in. I'm going to dip it in the Nook Num. Ooh. In fact, that's probably the way to go because having that lettuce there kind of mitigates some of that oiliness. You know, I said earlier that a hallmark of the northern style pho in Vietnam is the beefiness of the broth. So it tends to be more beefy and less sweet. And the broth here is much less sweet than at Pho Huy. So this is not a northern broth by any means, but it has certainly the qualities of it. It's very different. The beefiness of this broth stands out. Whereas the first broth that I had at Pho Huy, the overall profile was beefy, but the sweetness kind of wrapped around it, if that makes any sense. So you have a very sweet quality to it, whereas this one is much less so. And so the beefiness is very prominent. And in fact, that's the distinguishing feature of the broth. In fact, I like this one better because it's less sweet. And I would say the quality of the meats here is quite high. The brisket is very soft, and quite flavorful. One thing I noticed about the broth immediately upon looking at it is you have this thin sheen of oil, of fattiness, kind of glistening on the surface, which is something that is quite nice actually, because as they say, fat is flavor. So you want the broth to be clean, but not exceedingly clean, so that you take all the fat away and therefore the flavor as well. If you know anything about pho, it has some ingredients that are well known and that every pho restaurant uses to make their broths. Yeah, so the secret ingredient here supposedly is pennywort, a kind of sea plant that grows in wetlands in Asia. And in fact, in Vietnam, they use it to make a drink, an iced drink. And it's treated as a herbal drink or a medicinal drink. I don't recall ever having it myself, but supposedly it has a grassy, asparagus kind of flavor, even a kind of cucumber water flavor, as I've read. So it's quite interesting. I don't know how it changes the broth necessarily, but I hope to find out. Supposedly there is a bitter, kind of slimy quality to it as well that is mitigated by the sweet components in the broth. So that bitterness and kind of sliminess is canceled out by the other ingredients. And not only that, probably by the boiling as well. So we'll find out soon. Okay, in terms of the secret ingredient I mentioned earlier, the pennywort, I mean, it's not that easy to sleuth out and to, taste it. It's because it's buried in there. But let me say to you this. Of the three broths that we had today, this one is the most complex and the most distinguished, I think. It's not dramatically and singularly beefy as the one we just had at Pho 24. And it's not as sweet as the one we had at Pho Huy. This is complex. There's a lot of things going on in it. You don't taste like a strong beefiness necessarily, but there's a complexity and a layeredness about it, if that makes any sense. It's a good broth. It's just a tasty soup broth is what it is. A lot of places will use MSG in their broths. That's a standard practice, I think, amongst pho restaurants. But I certainly do not taste it in this one. Not necessarily that it would be bad if I did. I don't necessarily have anything against MSG. There's a naturalness to the sweetness here that is distinguishable from the sweetness that you would get from an MSG inflected broth. I've never been here before. I came here to find out about that secret ingredient, and I think I did find out about it because the broth here is quite good. So I would consider this a nice find, a nice discovery. Pho Golden 5 stars out here in Springfield. They gave themselves 5 stars already, and it's in the name. It was quite a day today, eating pho around Northern Virginia, and concluding here at Pho Golden 5 stars, where I found an unusually delicious broth with a secret ingredient in it. Very nice owner here, but she didn't confirm to me. She was unwilling to tell me exactly what that secret ingredient was. She said that she didn't want to let the word out because every pho shop has their own secrets. But if you're in the area and you're near Springfield, Virginia, come taste it for yourself. So thanks for watching. Leave me a comment below. Do you eat pho a lot? What are the pho restaurants like where you are? Until my next adventure, this is Vablonsky. Bye-bye.